Welcome back to EpicPit, Reddit Stories. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and share, it really helps the channel grow. Now, our very first story today has one of the most unusual titles I've ever come across. My tote bag exploded on the bus and... Sounds messy, right? But trust me, this isn't just a story about soup and broken straps. It's about how, in the middle of an ordinary day, a group of total strangers came together and turned an embarrassing disaster into a heartwarming reminder that kindness still exists. So let's dive in. I had one of those days. You know, the kind, long hours at work, a to-do list that never seemed to shrink, and a body running on caffeine fumes. By the time I left the office, all I wanted was to get home, throw on some sweatpants and collapse. I boarded the bus, my trusty old tote bag slung over my shoulder. That tote had been with me for years. It wasn't pretty, but it was reliable, or so I thought. It held everything I needed to survive city life. My wallet, keys, a spare pair of flats for when my heels got unbearable, and that day, a mason jar of homemade soup I'd brought for lunch but never had time to eat. The bus was crowded but not unbearable. I found a spot to stand near the middle, wrapping my hand around the cold metal pole. The air smelled faintly of diesel, damp coats, and the lingering scent of someone's fast food. People were in their own little bubbles. Headphones in, eyes on phones, tired stares fixed out the window. Just another ordinary commute. And then, disaster. Without warning, the strap on my tote bag gave a loud snap. In a split second, the entire contents of my bag exploded across the bus floor. Wallet, tampons, flat, receipts, and worst of all, that glass jar of soup. It hit the floor with a sickening crack and rolled just far enough before shattering. Thick, golden broth sloshed out and began sliding down the aisle like it had its own destination, right toward the driver's feet. Time seemed to freeze. My heart dropped into my stomach. I felt every pair of eyes on me. My face burned hot with embarrassment. The bus did that thing where everyone inhales at once. The collective, wordless gasp of strangers watching something awkward and messy unfold. I couldn't move. All I could think was, this is it. This is how my day finally breaks me. But then something happened I didn't expect. Before I could even bend down, a woman in scrubs, a nurse, judging by the ID badge clipped to her pocket, slid into action. She knelt gracefully, almost like it was second nature, and quickly shoved her own lunch container across the aisle, blocking the stream of soup before it reached the driver. "Don't worry, I got it," she said calmly, like stopping runaway soup on a bus was part of her job description. Next, a teenager, couldn't have been older than 16, pulled off his hoodie and used it like a giant net to scoop up my scattered belongings. He worked fast, sweeping up tampons, pens, and receipts, tucking them safely into the bundle of fabric so they wouldn't roll under seats. His face was serious, focused, like this was his heroic mission of the day. Behind me, a man with flecks of paint under his fingernails and calloused hands crouched down. Without saying a word, he dug into his tool pouch and pulled out a roll of bright blue painter's tape. With the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, he grabbed my broken tote, lined up the snap strap, and started wrapping. Round and round, smooth and tight, like a Formula One pit crew fixing me up in seconds. Meanwhile, napkins began appearing like magic. Someone pulled a stack from their bag. Another person handed over fast food tissues. They passed napkins row by row, strangers working together in a chain, blotting up the soup. The bus driver, who had every right to be annoyed, didn't even sigh. Instead, he calmly pulled over, reached behind his seat, and handed me a spare trash bag. "Here," he said kindly, "for the mess. Don't worry about it. We've all had days like this." For the next 3 stops, we weren't just passengers on a bus. We became an assembly line. The nurse kept the soup contained. The teenager bundled my things with care. The painter reinforced my bag like it was going to war. The napkin crew tackled the spill with surprising efficiency. And the driver, steady as ever, made sure I had space and time to get myself together. I stood there, stunned, tears pricking my eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming kindness of complete strangers. By the time my stop arrived, the chaos was gone. My bag, patched up with painter's tape, held everything together. The floor was wiped clean. And me. I felt steadier than I had all week. As I stepped off the bus, people clapped. Not mocking applause. Genuine, light-hearted claps of encouragement. A reminder that sometimes, even in the grind of city life, people do notice. People do care. I laughed. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. The tension of my awful day melting away. Walking into the evening air, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that humanity isn't gone. That kindness is alive and well. Hidden in small acts from ordinary people who just decide, for one moment, to help. Because sometimes, all it takes is a broken tote bag on a crowded bus to remind you, you're not as alone in this world as you think. The funny thing is, I've replayed that moment in my head dozens of times since. Not because of the embarrassment, though trust me, dropping tampons and soup in front of strangers is the stuff of nightmares, but because of how quickly people shifted from bystanders to helpers. Think about it. Nobody had to do anything. They could have stared, rolled their eyes, or just turned up the volume on their headphones. But they didn't. They jumped in. They used what they had on hand. A lunchbox, a hoodie, some napkins, a roll of tape. And together, they fixed something that had completely broken me only seconds before. It wasn't just about saving my stuff, it was about saving me. In that tiny window of time, strangers reminded me that there is still goodness in the world. That even when life feels messy and overwhelming, kindness can appear in the most unexpected places. I'll never know their names. I'll never get to thank them properly. But I'll never forget them either. The nurse, the teenager, the painter, the napkin crew, the bus driver. They stitched me back together in 3 stops. And in the process, they restored a piece of faith I didn't even realize I had lost. So, the next time you're on a bus or standing in line at the grocery store or walking down a crowded street, remember this. Humanity is still here. People are still good. Sometimes all it takes is a cracked jar of soup to prove it. Now, the next story is one that starts off with something sweet. Literally. A simple homemade chocolate cake. But what was meant as a kind gesture for coworkers turned into total chaos when an innocent act of baking sparked rumors, panic, and even career consequences. This story is titled, "The Cake That Almost Got Me Fired." Let's jump in. So yesterday I did something I thought was pretty harmless. I decided to bake a cake for my coworkers. Nothing special, nothing fancy, just a simple chocolate cake with a shiny ganache glaze. The kind of cake that says, "Hey, I like baking, and hey, I like you all enough to share." Now, baking for me is therapy. When life feels stressful or routine, I reach for flour, sugar, cocoa powder, and suddenly I feel better. So that night, whisk in one hand, spatula in the other, I poured myself into that cake. By the time it cooled and the ganache settled into that glossy, perfect surface, I thought, this is going to brighten someone's day tomorrow. The next morning, I carefully carried it into the office like it was a newborn. I set it on the break room table, nice and centered, grabbed some plates and forks, and sent out a quick all-office email. Cake in the kitchen. Help yourself. That's it. No emojis, no hidden message. Just cake. By lunchtime, people started filing by my desk, one after another. Smiles on their faces, little crumbs on their lips, telling me how much they loved the cake. And I'll be honest, it felt good. Who doesn't like a little thank you for their effort? But then I started noticing something strange. People weren't just thanking me. They were saying things like, "We're really going to miss you. So, where are you headed next? Congratulations on your new opportunity." And I just sat there blinking, completely confused. Miss me? Headed where? New opportunity. That's when it hit me. Somewhere along the line, my coworkers had decided that me bringing in a random cake was my farewell gesture. Apparently, there's an unwritten rule in my office. If someone brings in baked goods out of the blue, it means they're quitting. No one told me this rule. How was I supposed to know cake equals career resignation? By the time my manager stopped by with this sympathetic little smile and said, "Let's schedule some time to talk about your future here," I was panicking inside. I actually like my job. I'm not quitting. I was just baking. For fun. In my head, I'm already imagining the worst. Gossip flying around, my boss drafting job postings, HR preparing exit papers, all because of one innocent chocolate cake. And then I thought, maybe I should just bake cookies tomorrow. Put them in the kitchen with a massive neon sticky note that says, "I'm not leaving. I just like sugar." But wait, it gets better. See, this story reminded me of something that happened earlier in my career, years ago at a completely different job. And that one, it wasn't funny. At the time, I was working as a manager in a massive factory. The job kept me on my feet, running from one department to another. The side effect, I started dropping weight without even trying. Nothing extreme, just the kind of change that comes when you're moving constantly instead of sitting at a desk all day. After a few months, my clothes were hanging on me and I finally thought, okay, time to invest in some new clothes that actually fit. So I went shopping, came back with some fresh outfits, and the next day I showed up at work looking sharper than usual. Felt good, confident even. For once, my clothes weren't baggy or ill-fitting. But apparently, in the twisted world of workplace assumptions, looking nice suddenly meant I must be interviewing somewhere else. My co-workers whispered. My bosses noticed. And then, without warning, I was called into an office and let go. Why? Because they were convinced I was planning to leave anyway. They thought I was dressing up for interviews during my lunch break. The truth, I wasn't even thinking about quitting. I had no interviews lined up, no plans to leave. I just bought clothes that fit. That was my crime. I thought about suing for wrongful termination. I really did. But then something ridiculous happened. HR forgot to stop my paychecks. For weeks, I kept getting paid even though I wasn't working there anymore. By the time someone caught the mistake, I'd been overpaid by so much that I just considered it my severance package and walked away. But that whole experience left me with a lesson. In any workplace, you have to be careful. People will assume things. Sometimes the smallest action, a cake, a new shirt, a different attitude, gets twisted into something bigger than it really is. So here I am, years later, once again watching office rumors swirl around me, this time because of a cake. Chocolate cake with ganache, nothing more. You know what I learned? Workplaces are like little ecosystems. Gossip spreads faster than oxygen. Everyone's on the lookout for signs of change. A cake. Clearly you're quitting. New clothes. Definitely interviewing. A longer lunch break. Must be planning an exit strategy. And the truth is, most of the time, none of it is true. But here's the silver lining. Those misunderstandings also reveal something else. People notice you. They care, even if in a weird, indirect way. My coworkers didn't just eat my cake and move on. They came by to thank me, to ask questions, to wish me well, even though I wasn't going anywhere. It made me realize. Sometimes the office feels like just a place where you clock in and out, but moments like this remind you there's a community there too. People form little bonds, little rituals, even unwritten rules about cake. And while losing that factory job years ago stung at the time, I can look back and laugh now. Because it taught me a lesson I still carry. Protect yourself, but don't let paranoia steal your joy. Bake the cake. Wear the clothes. Just maybe stick a sticky note on it that says, "Not quitting, just in a baking mood."